Welcome to At Your Library. I'm your host, Cathleen Clifford. On Tuesday, October 29th at 6:30 p.m., the Groton Public Library will host Paranormal Tales with Joe Franke. I am thrilled to welcome paranormal investigator, demonologist, lecturer, consultant, and CFO of the Warren Legacy Foundation, Joe Franke.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to At Your Library. So we want people to come to the event at the end of the month. So we're going to ask some questions to get a little information, a little taste of what they're going to have.
Sure.
So my first question is for those that don't know, you are part of the Warren Legacy Foundation. Who were Ed and Lorraine Warren?
Well, it's funny you should ask. Ed and Lorraine Warren to me were like grandparents. They were just normal people with an abnormal hobby, I guess. The Warrens met when they were just teenagers. They got married, when they were very young. Ed was in the Navy, they were always they were actually artists growing up. They were artists and painters, and Ed would sketch and paint, and but Ed grew up in a haunted house. His father was a state trooper, and his father would always say, "Son, there's a reason for everything. There's a reason why everything happens." But Ed would say from the age of, I believe, 5 to 12, he lived in this house where he said almost on a nightly basis, the closet door would open up and he would see this manifestation of what looked like to be an old woman.
Oh, okay.
And it would scare him at first. And then he became more intrigued and wanted to know more, And so in 1952, Ed and Lorraine started NESPR, which is the New England Society for Psychic Research. And they are what I like to call, anyway, pioneers in this field. I don't call it an industry. This isn't really, for me, it's not an occupation, it's a vocation. This was a calling.
Okay.
So they were just very normal people. I mean, to sit and have a conversation with them, just, two normal people, like I say, grandparents to me, because I was 18 years old when I met them. Now I'm that age.
Now.
I'm at that age now, so for me it's kind of come full circle.
Now, did you become interested in paranormal investigating before or after you met the Warrens?
Well, I've always been fascinated by ghosts. Matter of fact, growing up I used to watch Scooby-Doo. It was my favorite cartoon.
Agree, love it.
But my wife and I were newly dating at the time. We'd only been dating for a few months. When, back then, back in the mid-'80s, the thing to do was to go to the movies. And I said, we've seen about every movie out there, and let's do something different. So Laurel sees in the paper that the Warrens are going to be lecturing in North Haven, which was one town over from us. And she's like, oh, this looks pretty cool. And I had heard of the Warrens. I had seen them on television and read about them in print media and the radio. We didn't have internet then.
Right.
This is 1986.
Right.
And so she's like, would you like to go see them? I'm like, yeah, it sounds great. So I was always interested and fascinated in ghosts and spirits and demonic activity and things like that, but never thought I'd be involved in it.
Okay.
So we go to the show that night, and Lorraine is at the table, selling the tickets and greeting people. And she looks at me, and I remember very vividly, she cocks her head to the side, and she's looking at me as if I know this person. When you see somebody, like, where do I know this person from? What is their name? I can't remember. And she's looking at me, and she's like, honey, have we met before? Now, she called everybody honey. She was the sweetest woman. And I said, no, Lorraine, I've heard a lot about you and Ed, and heard you on the radio and seen on television. I was very excited to be here. And she's looking at me now. I didn't know what she was doing at the time. She explained later. And she's like, honey, there's a reason why you're here tonight. She goes, make sure you come and see Ed and I after the show. I want to talk to you.
Wow. Yeah.
I could barely, keep a thought in my head. As I'm watching the presentation, I was obviously intrigued by it. It was an old slide presentation where you click the slides. Now we have PowerPoint and Canva and all that. So we go out afterwards. I remember the presentation ends, and Ed and Tony, their son-in-law, were cleaning up. And Ed's like very, very gruff. I loved him to death, but he's like, come on, Lorraine, let's go. I'm hungry, And Lorraine would stay and answer everybody's questions. She would always stay and answer people's questions. And this frustrated Ed sometimes, but he understood. So we went across the street, down the street a bit, there was a diner on Route 5. So we went to the diner, and I remember Laurel's sitting next to me, Lorraine's here holding my hands, Ed and Tony were there. And what she was doing, she explained to me, was she goes, honey, I'm reading your aura.
Oh, okay.
Lorraine had the ability to read auras. It's that supernatural glow that emanates from everyone, all of us. And she's like, I'm reading your aura. And she goes, honey, I can tell you we're meant to do this work.
Wow.
Would you like to come and work with Ed and I? So
Wow.
I was basically chosen by the Warrens.
How does that make you feel?
And I was ecstatic. I was like, yeah. I don't think I skipped a beat. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So back then, the Warrens were formulating some classes. And there was about 4 or 5 other people. I remember some of their names, but I haven't seen them since. I mean, a lot of people come and go in this work, but I'm still here, some 4 decades later, and they would have these classes in a little place called Hawley Manor in Newtown, Connecticut, which is now, I believe, the Inn at Newtown. But Hawley Manor was had a restaurant, and there was a back room not much bigger than a coat closet.
Oh.
And I remember the Warrens would come in, and there would be Monday night classes. They'd run maybe 7 to 9. And Ed would come in with boxes of stuff, videotapes, audio tapes, notes that they had taken from cases like Annabelle, Amityville, the Harrisburg haunting, which turned into the Conjuring, first Conjuring movie. And this is how I first learned of all these cases. And Amityville intrigued me the most. There's a lot of rhetoric out there that Amityville was a hoax. It wasn't a hoax. There are some fabrications brought up in years past by people, stories that have been embellished or just flat out made up. But to the Warrens, this wasn't Amityville horror. This was just another haunted house, a case, But they weren't prepared for what they found there, So I know I get off on a tangent, but the Warrens were just honest, good, loving people. They were parents, they were grandparents. They took me under their wing. Ed used to tease me because their grandson Chris is a good friend of mine. We've been friends forever, and he goes, Joe, you're the grandson I always wish I had, just to tease Chris.
Just
but
to tease him, right?
They were, I was like their adopted grandson. I was with them. I probably spent more time at their house and at their museum than I did my own back in the day. And so we would do the classes on Monday nights. I would go to their lectures with them, and not only to help them, but to learn. Mm-hmm. I also backed up as security because you did get some people that got disrespectful at times. And, Lorraine would say, I would hold the money, because I had my pockets, I have money in my pocket. And Lorraine would say, no, honey, if anybody gets out of line, you just give them their money back and send them on their way. Rarely did I have to do that.
Wow.
But there were some times where people get a little disrespectful, and Ed would just look over at me and like, sir, look, I understand you paid to see the show, but so did everybody else. I'm going to ask you to be respectful, or I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Right. Very rarely did that happen. But that's how I started.
Okay.
I don't think I went on my first case alone for quite a few years.
You would go and investigate with the Warrens.
Right, I would go with them.
Other did they have a whole team?
There was a bunch of folks like myself. We would go together. A couple of guys are good friends of mine now. Jimmy and Rick were joined in 1991, about 5 years after I did, and they're still in the work, and they're still really good friends of mine. Nice. And then of course John Zaffis, who is their nephew,
right?
Very good friend of mine. John's still he's still active. I still work cases when needed. I'm more of like the elder now. People come to me for advice or whatever. I'll join a Zoom call and listen in on a case, but
you're not leading the investigations
not
right
usually,
now.
no, because we have regional directors all over the country, all over the world, really. We're kind of a global organization. We're still growing,
right?
The Warren Legacy Foundation.
Okay.
But I leave it to the capable hands of our regional directors, which were handpicked by us.
Okay.
And if they need my help or my advice or my counsel,
you're there for them.
Right. I never step on anybody's toes and say, well, I'm taking charge. It's not me.
So you brought up Annabelle, Conjuring, Amityville. My viewers would be upset with me if I didn't ask you why you didn't bring Annabelle with you today.
Well,
where is she? Where is Annabelle?
Annabelle is not mine to bring. Annabelle lives in the museum still.
Okay.
She belongs to the family. Judy Spera is their daughter.
Is their daughter, yes.
And Tony, very, very nice folks. They, good friends of mine. I've known them for 40 years also. But the house is still there.
Okay.
The home is in Monroe, Connecticut.
Now the museum is not open at this time.
No, the museum, unfortunately, is not open to the public anymore because the home is at the end of a cul-de-sac.
Oh, in a residential neighborhood.
In a residential neighborhood, and they used to have events at the house, and I was just about every one of them. But unfortunately, those events would grow, and you'd have 50 cars parked on the street.
Oh, okay.
And it was not so much. Yes, it was annoying the neighbors, but it was more of a hazard. If emergency crews needed to get in, the police or fire or whatever, and you have all these cars parked on their property and then it would spill out onto the road.
Right.
So I guess the town had said at one point, some years back, said you can't do these anymore.
Okay.
So they would move them to a local restaurant or area. Now they have a Paracon every year. It was just this past weekend. It was in Gettysburg.
Oh.
And they'll bring some of the items to the people because they can't bring the people to the items. I do believe he may give private tours for a select number of people. Don't know whether he charges or not. If he does, I don't know what. I'm not.
You're not part of that part.
Annabelle, I've held the doll a few times in my life under Ed's supervision, and that was part of my training. Wasn't afraid of it. I respected the power of not the doll itself. It's just an inanimate object. It's a Ragged Ann doll.
Right.
36-inch Ragged Ann doll. But the stories of what the doll did, or not the doll itself, but whatever diabolical entity that inhabited the doll. Because no human entity, no human spirit, I should say, can inhabit an inanimate object. Okay? I know a lot of people say, well, it's the spirit of a little girl in the doll. I'm like, no, it's not. That's how the story got started.
Oh, and that's where the movies came from.
Well, yeah, the story.
The fiction, right.
The story about Annabelle is that, you know, the doll was given to a nurse by her mother. I think she was 28 years old at the time, but as a gift. And these two nurses lived together. They worked for the Institute of Living, I think, in Hartford. I'm going back to 1970. And the nurses treated the doll as a child. You know, they thought it was cute. They would buy dresses for it, jewelry, sit it at the table when it was mealtime. And as Ed would tell the story, he said one morning they're at breakfast and the doll's hand just levitated onto the table.
Oh.
And he said, this didn't really frighten them, it intrigued them. It's like, well, why would that happen? And they said, is there a spirit inside this doll, controlling this doll? So they had another friend, nurse at work that was a medium, I guess, or psychic, and they had a seance. Bad idea.
Okay.
You know, seance is not a good idea. But they had a seance, and the medium said that it was the spirit of a little girl that was killed outside their apartment building in an automobile accident. Her name was Annabelle. That's how the story started.
Oh, okay.
Name Annabelle.
And that's how the doll got its name. Okay.
The thing is with the doll is the seances opened up a doorway, which I talk about in my lectures.
Okay. Divination
practices. You know, seeking to foretell future events or finding hidden knowledge through supernatural means. That never ends well. And I'll be giving a lot of examples at my talk. But so they gave this doll a lot of recognition, or this spirit a lot of recognition, and then it turned evil.
Wow. I'm going to stop you right on that point because we want people to come to the lecture and hear more. We're just going to take a quick break right now.
Sure.
And then we'll come back and we'll talk more about when you come in October. Please stay tuned.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Multiple studies have shown that marijuana can slow both driver reaction and response time, which can be really dangerous. He's here. He's here. Wait. What?
I can't drive.
Why?
I'm high.
Oh.
Welcome back to At Your Library. Today I'm speaking to paranormal investigator Joe Franke. Joe will be here at the Groton Public Library on Tuesday, October 29th at 6:30 p.m. His presentation, Paranormal Tales, is free and open to the public. Everybody is welcome to attend. So when you do your presentations, your lectures, is there a specific message that is your goal on why you speak at libraries and institutions and schools? And what is your goal as you and the Warren Legacy Foundation?
Well, it's a very good question, and I'm asked that quite often. And what I like to do, and I'm a big ham, I like to entertain people, but what I want people to realize is I take this work extremely seriously. And the time I've spent doing the work and the families I've helped, and we don't charge to help people. And I tell people, look, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears have gone into this work over the years, and pain. I said, but what you get back is immeasurable. You can't put a dollar figure on what you do. So my message to the public is really to educate them, whether they be a member of the general public or maybe an up-and-coming investigator themselves, is I want to educate you on the common misconceptions and dangers of investigating, because it's not all fun and games. It shouldn't be about how many likes or followers you get and, having a YouTube channel and then monetizing that. There's certainly nothing illegal about that, but in some cases, some of the things I think it's immoral. Because you have an obligation if someone comes to you and they're terrified. They're generally terrified. They don't understand what's happening to them. Whether it's paranormal affliction or not, we get involved or I get involved. I try to help them understand what's happening. And if there is a paranormal issue, to face your fear. I always say, faith and fear can't coexist. And the reason I say that is because people will ask me, well, should I go out and get some holy water and some crucifixes? I'm like, well, wait a minute, those things are just objects. And they're nothing but a piece of wood or a piece of metal unless you believe and you have the faith behind it. Faith is your weapon, not this object, not this holy water. Okay, your faith is, and I always quote a phrase from the movie Miracle on 34th Street, which I absolutely love, and that is, faith is believing in things that common sense tells you not to. Faith is believing in something that's intangible. Do you believe in air? Well, yeah, air sustains life. We breathe it, but can we see it? Can we touch it? Not really, no. So you have to have faith in something. Whatever your religious beliefs are, your background or whatever. I've dealt with people with all faiths, people with no faith. They say there's no atheists in foxholes. There's no atheists in haunted houses either. They're like, how can I get rid of it? Joe, can you come over and get rid of this? I said, no, that's not what I do. I said, I'll come over. I got your back. I got your six. I'll guide you. I'll support you. Okay. You're going to get rid of it. This is your home. This is your family. This is your place of business. If you have an actual paranormal affliction here, not something else, nothing, I always say, try to explain it naturally. Find a natural explanation. Don't take that nuclear option and go from 0 to 60 and all of a sudden, I've got a demon here. You hear that everywhere these days, and it's very frustrating for me.
Right.
So I said to people, I said, well, if you had a demon, you would know it. Well, why did ABC Paranormal come in here last weekend and they ran out of my house because something happened or they heard a noise or they heard a growl? I said, well, did they investigate where the source of this noise was? No, they just grabbed their equipment and they left.
Came with the camera. Anybody can have
and
a camera.
And they, pardon the pun, they ghosted me. They won't return my phone calls. They got scared off.
Wow.
And so it's because they don't really understand what they're doing. I said, they have had no formal education, no formal training. I was fortunate. I had Ed and Lorraine Warren, who took me under their wing, invited me into their family, so to speak, And I was with my good friend John Zaffis not long ago where I was at his house. And I had asked him, we were talking about reputations and things like that. And I asked him about, have you ever heard anything about my reputation, anything negative? Because I wear my heart on my sleeve. If I don't know an answer, I won't make one up. I'll tell you, that's a very good question. I don't know. Let me find out.
Okay.
And John looked at me and almost brought me to tears the way he said it. He said, Joe, you're family. He goes, you've been there. You've worked with my aunt and uncle since you were 18 years old. He goes, you have a stellar reputation. And that's all that's important to me. It's not about making money. I don't have a YouTube channel.
Right.
It's not about that. It's not about getting my face on television. I tease, I said, I have a face for radio. I said, but I want to get that message out to people. It said, you know, I always tell people, be kind, be gentle, and be humble.
Nice.
Okay? You know.
So when they come to your lecture, what can they expect to hear and or see?
Well, what I'm going to do is I've created something new this year. I try to mix up my presentations from year to year. But what I really want to get into is my paranormal journey, as I call it.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about, you know, my history as a paranormal researcher, how I got involved in it, how I met the Warrens, what they taught me, and now I try to shift over to some of their more iconic cases, like Amityville, like Annabelle, the Conjuring series. I also have a couple of very bad cases. One of them I call my Amityville case. That's in Enfield, Connecticut, that I was involved with heavily from 2007 to 2010, and I'm still involved in it.
Okay.
It's
still going on.
The house, yes, the house was successfully exorcised back in 2013, 2012, somewhere around there, when Bishop McKenna came in. But the family contacted me recently, within the past year, and said, we have activity. Now, they do have activity, but it's not to the level of what I dealt with back then. They've got some activity because it's the land. The house I consider a hub, and the land around it, and you know, the Connecticut River is a stone's throw away, and you know, so it's the land, the history of the land. There's a lot of history to the home and the property and the neighborhood. There's been murders and suicides in and around the home.
So it's,
you know,
it's not just this house.
Right.
It's everything that has been there since the beginning.
Right, but the thing is, the activity gets to the point where these poor families, it's a duplex, they can't keep a renter. They have the family side, the residential side, and then what we call the renter side.
So the family does live on the property?
Family still lives there. They've tried to sell the house multiple times, and every time something comes up and the deal falls through. You know, they have twin daughters. The girls were a little over a year when I got involved. I have twin daughters, so it's very near and dear to my heart. When there's kids involved, I get involved. Okay? The girls call me Uncle Joe. You know, that's how close I am to this family. I've known them for 18 years. The girls will be, well, they'll be 18 at the end of December.
Wow.
So now they're almost adults, but they're still having issues, but again, not to the degree, not the demonic activity that we had back in the day.
But still issues with the family. So you'll talk about that when you come.
Yeah, I actually have some video to show as well. I only show at my lectures. It's not out on YouTube.
Okay.
It's an actual video that I copyrighted. It's when I showed Lorraine this video many years ago. She looked at me like a deer in headlights, and she said, "My God, honey, I've never seen anything like that in my life."
Wow. So if you come to the lecture, we'll get
Come to the
see
lecture,
this.
you get to see the video
Fantastic.
and hear the story.
I cannot thank you so much for being here. I could sit here and talk to you for, you know, the next 3 days,
Thank you.
but you have a very, very busy schedule, so I appreciate you taking
I'm
the
honored that you asked me here today. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you for taking the time to come. On October 29th, here at the Groton Public Library, Joe will talk about his paranormal tales, including some of the things he talked about today. Please come out. It's at 6:30 p.m., free and open to the public. If you have any questions, feel free to stop by the library, call the Groton Public Library, or visit our website. This has been At Your Library. Thanks for checking in.